Hi everyone, welcome to the second installment of the Consulting Beyond MBB series. Today, we bring to you another non-MBB consulting firm that's making a significant impact in the industry, which is shattering boundaries and bringing fresh perspectives to the table. To do so, we have with us one of our very own alumnus, Ashish Bijlani. Ashish has been a dual degree student from the batch of 2016-21 at the Department of Naval Architecture and Ocean Engineering with his master's in computational engineering. During his time on campus, he has worked closely with the placements team and the career development cell across his roles as the IPR head and the department legislator. In terms of internships, he has worked with Pfizer, Cases Over Coffee, Intellecting IoT Labs, apart from a list of research projects and engagements. He then went on to join Auctus via campus recruitments and is currently working there as an associate. Welcome, Ashish. We are very grateful to have you here.
Likewise, it's a pleasure. So,
Yeah. Okay, so guys, before we start, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and do hit the bell icon to get notifications. Okay, so Ashish, we'll start.
definitely, go ahead.
So, uh, as soon as we say like big three and the other consulting firms, what are some of the things that come to the top of your head in terms of the similarities and differences between these?
Sure. So, firstly, when it comes to similarities, I think most of the companies that our campus brings on in terms of consulting firms, at least from my time, when I say that, I mean the Octus, or maybe Dalberg will cover later, but there's Octus, there's Accenture Strategy. I think at some point there was talks with Strategy and or 80K, vagera. So, these are all in the management consulting spaces, which are by nature industry agnostic. So in that sense, you do get the kind of exposure in terms of the width and of types of industries, the kind of problem statements that you would get in an MBB. What varies is the brand and the scale at which we operate. In the sense that your McKinsey, Bain, BCs are going to be much more established. They're going to possibly work with the same clients. We very often bid for the same projects, but it is the internal structure and frameworks that vary. So you'll have a complete support group. You will have a team that will help you with your research. You'll have a team that will help you with presentations in MBB, which is not always there in these companies. It varies company to company. Octus, for example, we don't. So we do a lot of the stuff by ourselves.
Hmm.
And in terms of smaller instances like, relocations, we don't travel as much. Typically, we relocate to the cities that we're going to. So the more finer, I think the difference comes out more in terms of operations. And to some extent, it comes out to even knowledge transfer. It's a lot of figuring out via connects. Like I've done a project, I will not always have a repository to go after. I'll know somebody in the firm, which I do have close connect with because it's a small organization. So I'll go up to them, say, this is what I'm working with. Can you help me with something? And it moves on. So it's a trade-off. You work with a small, closer knit team, at least in the case of Optus,
Hmm.
but you may not always get the bells and whistles that you'll get in a top tier brand. But in terms of the project nature, the exposure, I think it has been quite on par and sometimes better in the sense that the relative responsibility is quite high. I work in a very lean team, so to some extent we absorb roles that a manager would do in an MBB.
Hmm.
So that is the trade-off that you are looking at in these companies typically.
Hmm. So when you mention lean teams, like how many people are there in each team, like approximately?
So, okay, so one answer that I think will be a recurring theme for everything I say is within any firm also, all answers are very project specific.
Correct.
So there's going to be a
Correct.
lot of activity. But in my case, it is partner and it used to be partner and meet at a point. So
Oh.
that was the way I was working with. I'm the
Hmm.
only person who is at client office, for example. So in that
Hmm.
sense, you also have the responsibility of the face of the company from the client project standpoint. And then
Hmm.
we've had a manager onboarded and more associates in. But time and time again, it has been, and Octus particularly, I think I will be sitting for the pre-placement talks shortly. You'll always
Correct.
hear this like anecdote where Octus typically just throws people into the deep end. On day one, you go client facing. I think it's fairly common to the extent that it was the same case for me. Within a week, I was put onto a CEO meeting
Hmm.
talking about what the client is doing, what we have worked on. So it's quicker to client, quicker to responsibility, lesser
There's
breathing
not
room.
hand
Yeah,
holding.
yeah. We don't even do a training system. Like I won't comment whether it's good or bad, but we learn fairly well on the job in that sense. So we just get started and it works on thereafter. I think my second project also was similar where I had partner and me who were doing PMO for a public market launch. So, all the stakeholders, I was following up with them, etc., remotely because it was in the time of COVID. And
Hmm.
yeah, it just took off from there and has been at the same pace and ever more hectic thereafter.
Okay, okay, interesting. Also, like within it campus right now, there's a lot of hype around MBB. So, do you think that's justified, and what do you think is the reason for this? Because no one really talks about any other firm now, at least within campus.
Fair. I think firstly, a lot has changed between campus before COVID and now with the disconnect. But I
Correct.
think let's break the hype into two sections. There's a hype regarding consulting firstly, and then
Hmm.
there is the MBB within that. So I think consulting is something that has a fair degree of hype involved over and above what the role stands to offer. In the sense, yes, it has its perks, which is why, see, I've been on the placement team. I know why we slotted in the first slot. It is typically the most preferred profile given A, the kind of exposure it gets you, B, the kind of pace at which you can expect your career progression to move along. That is for consulting in general, I'm saying right now. And lastly, C is going to be your exits. You're going to have great exits wherever you go.
Correct. Correct.
This put together is why consulting is up there. Now, within that, we can go back to the very first answer. MBB is going to be your established brands. These people are mainstay names and stalwarts of their industry. They are going to command that kind of respect, kind of bells and whistles for you on a personal level within the company. So naturally, it is fair that when you are on the consulting hype train or in that field, these are the places you're going to go after. Thereafter, you need to take your bets. Like thereafter, would you rather go to a next few consulting companies, people look at PM, so on and so forth. I think a
Hmm.
lot has to come up whether everyone needs to take a call whether consulting is really something for them. It's obviously fair to figure it out on the job, and I think you'll also have the luxury of getting some interns in these places, which is something that our batch did not have because that's 3 years ago now. But I think it's to be noted that it may not necessarily be for everybody, even if it's placed on top. You can have your priorities different, and it's okay if that's not something you want to pursue. So, in that sense, I would say there's some hype around consulting, but you need to take a call because it comes with a lot of hassles and
It's
work
not
times involved.
not for everyone. Agreed.
And it's fine to figure it out in the company, but if you have that kind of doubt, it's fair to even focus your prep. Like, I think it's a fair time to give this disclaimer. It's fair to focus your prep on another profile if you feel not as inclined towards consulting, but feel pressured because it's in the first slot. It's okay to
Hmm.
look at something that you might prefer because it need not be everyone's cup of tea.
Correct. 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 Agreed. Completely agree with you over there. Okay, so moving on, like, how did you develop interest towards consulting and why Octas in general? Because there's a lot of, I mean, even during your years, I think there was a lot of, sort like people sought after SD roles and quant roles and finance roles.
Right.
So,
I think particularly in my profile, I think consulting was more of a situational outcome that I could take out of campus because for 4 out of 5 years of my dual degree, I have been pursuing research for the longest
hmm,
time.
yeah,
So I've been doing projects. My third year, I chose actually haven't sat for campus internships either. I chose to stay back in campus, do an internship over there. I applied for all of your mainstay names of MyTax, Charpak, Pure, etc. And this was the summer of 2020, so my Charpak got waived off.
oh
And
God.
that's when I started, re-looking at whether research would make sense in that circumstances. And again, research, surprisingly enough, is also as subjective to the guide you work with. So
Correct.
at that point in time, I think during before the summer of my placements is when I had to look at other alternatives. And
Hmm.
consulting clearly, obviously, is projected as the best option from campus. And that coupled with most of my peers already working there, again, given my position in the IPR team, I was fairly aware of what
Huh,
consulting stands for. So
correct.
I was rather clear that I would put in my efforts to get through here if it's not research that I'm pursuing. So
Hmm.
thereafter, I've been actively seeking out internships over that summer, working remotely, which was the list that you started with. And Auctus was incidentally the only shortlist I had in 1.1
Okay.
because I think a lot of factors. Obviously, it was a last minute profile that I was putting together. Secondly, it was a COVID year, so our
Hmm.
shortlists were half of
Lot
the
of
typical shortlist sizes that you're looking at. Auctus at
Hmm.
the end of the day also picked up just one person and closed the process.
Hmm.
So I think placements in general is your preference combines a lot of external non-controllable factors and luck. So things worked out. Auctus worked out. And yeah, that's been it. So I was definitely convinced on the company.
Hmm.
Given a chance, definitely I'd be aspiring for something like the MBBs, no doubt about that. But at
Hmm.
the same time, I was clear that Auctus was definitely going to provide me an equal experience. And it was never a very fundamental or a massive step down in my head. I was
Correct.
like, I'm looking for the experience, I'm looking for the exposure, the kind of experience that I'm not tethered to an industry. I can get exposure, I can move around, try different projects while not having to switch jobs per se. So I knew Optus checked those
Exposed to all
boxes.
kinds of sectors.
Yeah, so when Optus shortlist came out, I knew how to go about it, and things shaped up, thankfully. Honestly, it's a lot of other extra factors, but things worked out, and that's where I have been, and no regrets since. But yeah, that's
So
the
you
journey to
mentioned,
consulting.
so you mentioned research and working with the guide. So was your research around Newark only? Because I'm also from Newark.
Yes, so I started with naval architecture, but I was quite inclined towards the computational aspects of it, in the
Okay.
sense that I would work with Sriram Professor, if you all are familiar from your department, who works on simulations.
Hmm.
And around that time is also when the IEEEs came into being, and
Correct.
computation felt like a no-brainer. So I have my master's in computational. So I think during my last 1.5 year, I shifted over to the applied mechanics department in that sense. But I think my topics have been the same. I've worked on fluid mechanics, simulations, waves, etc, and my DTP was there. So right until the end, I have seen it through in that sense. Just not right now in terms of pursuing it further.
Okay, interesting. That's very cool, I feel. So moving on to something about your firm Optus. What do you think is one advantage or unique thing that Optus has which MBB doesn't? MBB or any other consulting firm?
I think firstly, from a team and org standpoint, it would be on the lines of my first answer, wherein
Hmm.
the team size being this small, like Optus firstly as a company is 150 odd people strong. It ranges
Hmm.
from 150 to 200. So in that sense, you do tend to know next to everyone in the organization or most people in that sense. You have a like have a decent working rapport with a bunch of partners because it's that much more accessible. We have 5 to 6 key partners, and then we have associate partners, etc. Things have changed after our acquisition, of course, but it's a lot more accessible, it's a lot more approachable. And again, the team, each project, the kind of responsibility you get is increasingly more for the stature you are at in a typical consulting sense, is what my understanding is. Given my peers are in MBB, I do understand the kind of work happening over there. I do see the difference. And it is a consideration if I have to make a shift also, because you will be going back a few months or years in terms of the kind of responsibilities you do. Like I manage contracts, I manage new contracts also, which is something that
Hmm.
happens at an EM level in McKinsey, for example, is what I understand. So
Huh.
those kind of shifts come. It comes at all of those advantages. And specifically in terms of the exposure we have, I think Optus does have some speciality in bid consulting. We help companies raise bids for new projects, etc. That is apart from being industry agnostic. This is where we have a decent expertise, and one off and on we get some pretty cool projects. Like again, I wouldn't allude this to a very absolute advantage because not everyone will tap into it, but
Hmm.
we have been involved in IPL auctions and IPL team selling.
Damn.
Like the two teams that have come in have been a very marquee project that we have been vocal about. I don't think we were on the team that won it the last year because of how the elections panned out with a company basically throwing money. But we
Hmm.
were very much in the thick of it. And I'm not a cricket person myself, but it's definitely one of our key go-to party stories because you do sit and interact with some of the people who a lot of us would worship otherwise. So there are
Damn, nice.
a there are a good set of books in that sense.
It
But
must
yeah, I
have
think
been
it's
so exciting, like working with IPL teams.
it's been there. We've been doing that since possibly since inception in some form or fashion. So
Okay.
those kind of things are interesting. And I just think the overall access to all of this is much more.
Hmm. Right, right. Okay. My next question is around like what principles and core values does your firm prioritize? What do they look for?
Interesting. I realize now
Yeah,
that I've
like
not seen
how
my
is the work
company.
culture and all that?
So I think it's interesting we having discussed values in the typical sense, like how you go and prepare for a company which you have a value proposition program. But
Hmm.
no, I think typically what these people essentially they work with is they start off on the ground wherein they have full faith in you starting forward. They're like, look, if you are with us, we know you're going to be capable to move forward. So the entire value system is a lot of trust. Like they know they'll be okay if they put me on a project. And the
Hmm.
lens is not that we're going to leave you there. There'll be a safety net if things hit the roof. But
Hmm.
until then, they are going to be that trusting of you. At the same time, it is a intrinsic responsibility you have to deliver. So I
Correct.
think automatically the in terms of work, the maturity came around quite sooner because I know this is going straight to the client, for example. So you
Hmm.
have to start having that lens, and there's not always going to be someone who's going to vet the things that are going out by you, because clients are obviously one of the most primal stakeholders in the case of consulting.
Hmm.
Sure how
Right.
communication is happening and everything. So I think it's a very co-working group. There's a lot of support in that sense because they know the kind of workloads everyone's taking on. So
Hmm.
they're supportive in that sense, but they also have enough trust and they give people enough room to do their own thing. So
Correct.
you can
So
run things your own way pretty soon.
hmm. They expect you to be responsible for the firm.
Yeah. So it's
Interesting.
a good implied cycle that they have in that
Yeah,
sense.
because we've heard that like in a few other firms, there are like covers who like they handhold you, they tell you what to do, and then if you make up
Yeah.
mistakes, they take over, stuff like that. So this is
Which I think is good because honestly this can get a little intimidating. Like I think now that I'm sitting on the other side of it, it's simpler to look back and sound like I've like said, oh, I've done it. But on day one, it's not all floral because you still need to figure out like you basically at in clients you have basic doubts like do I call this person sir or not? And you don't always have the time to clarify it. Like don't get me wrong, you're there to clarify. You don't have the time. So
hmm,
those kind of things, what should be the tonality of your emails? You definitely learn on the job, but it
huh,
can get overwhelming. It can get overwhelming, and you need to be patient and prepared for it, is what I would suggest. And
hmm,
again, with the project subjectivity, how your projection goes in the company is a lot of the function of the projects you get and the people you work with. Like I have been really fortunate to have good people mentoring me throughout in this company. Like the first
okay.
project, the person who was from IIM also on the project was an unsaid cover for me. Like she really got me up the curve in that sense. Made piecewise projects and pieces for me to pick up, so as that I
Hmm,
can I can eventually take a bigger part of the pie. So in that sense, my ramp up was well taken care of, which is a function of why I might speak so positively about it today. But
hmm,
yeah, you need to be a little patient about it here because it's not going to be as structured as you would may want it or may be comfortable with at a personal level. So
correct,
it has
correct.
its cons. Like it's not just all floral. This one.
Yeah. So how many projects have you worked in till now?
I have worked in around 4 or 5 projects so far over 2 years. My last one has been maybe too long. It's been 14 months with the same client.
14
So
months?
yeah, I almost feel like an employee. But again, it's a very what is I think there across again companies is they have an upper limit and they typically don't force per se. So there have been discussions around it. But I think mutually, until now, it seemed beneficial to stay here because you have certain relations with the client and there are certain projects that are to be launched. In which
Hmm,
case, a move won't be productive for my time here if I don't close this and go. And it could jeopardize the project in that sense if they are not comfortable with the change. So
correct.
there are days when I feel like I'm not exactly too pleased to be this long, and there are days when it makes sense. But net
Hmm,
net, I think I have a project in my home city, which is why it works out. But these kind of things tend to happen in Optus, by the way. Projects can be long. Like I also
hmm,
know there are certain projects that we have with a certain government, for example, where people stay for extended periods of time, like upwards of 2, 3 years. There was the
okay.
previous academic affairs secretary also, if I'm not wrong, long back. who had spent his
Hmm.
entire tenure in Auctus with that client. Because
Okay.
it just he was like, I'm fine working here. It's a good government thing. There's a lot of exposure, a lot of high impact stuff happening within being here. So there's no need. So I think it's discussive. You work around in the best way possible for you and the company. So it's a little bit of compromise sometimes. But yeah, projects can be longer. Prior to this,
Oh.
I've had 6 months, 3 months, 3 months kind of projects.
Hmm.
But all have been in varied fields, so I'm not complaining as much. They've all been
So
in
those
different.
earlier projects, were you like moved from those projects after their completion or in between itself?
In that case, I think it was in between because that client was well conditioned to having a rotational team.
Okay. Okay.
So I think the partner was acknowledging enough in that case that you learned your bit. There's another opening in Bombay where you might be better suited because that was a remote Philippines project. So they're like,
Hmm.
we understand. I think a switch will be beneficial for you. Although we don't mind you being there, make the switch. So again, that's the kind of environment and people that I have been lucky enough to work with, which is good. The current one also is nice, which is why I stuck around. But yeah, possibly looking for the switch of project anytime soon.
Okay. So, moving on, is there any kind of a niche industry or sector that your firm focuses on, or
I
is it
huh.
generalized?
So I think in terms of industry, we have a we have projects across the board. Like we have stuff
Hmm.
right ranging from IT digital stuff to infrastructure, airports and road, and even some offbeat ones like cricket. And
Okay.
one of we are even consulting few startups for that matter, which is quite engaging because you get to see and be a crucial part of a very early stage startup in couple of cases. So the
Hmm.
spectrum is there, but there definitely is a polarization towards aviation, infrastructure, and in terms of practice, it's bid consulting that we do
Okay.
across the board. And
Hmm.
I think IT is coming up the curve pretty well also. Consulting for IT companies, wherein we don't do the tech part, but we do the PMO
Consulting
for
for
them.
IT companies.
I consulting for IT firms, yes. We do
Okay.
the PMO, project management, and development, etc. A lot of stuff which I'm not gotten exposure to myself, so I'll comment lesser. But I know it's a growing practice.
Okay. Okay.
So
And like, is there any major difference between the client base of MBB and non-MBB firms?
mm,
Like some major players who would always want to choose, MBB over the others, something of that sort.
I think I don't think there's a very fundamental difference in that sense because uh, we bid for the same companies in most cases, and they take a call basis what suits their budget and then requirement. There are instances when people go with initial strategy pieces with the larger companies, MBB, and then do execution with smaller companies like Optus. There are
Hmm.
cases when we have actually managed to retain very big tier clients also. Like one of the ones that is in our public domain that is disclosed widely is the Air India merger. That
Correct.
the management consultant on the piece was Optus, and thereafter we have been there in the post-merger integration phase integrally, and we're doing transformations, everything for them. So
Okay.
Optus manages to retain their clients quite well. So we have a lot of
Okay.
long-standing clients in that sense, apart from new
Relationships.
ones. And
Hmm.
I wouldn't say the scale is too off. Sure, some bigger banks do not always come here, but we do maybe short-term projects with them, and one of them will land up to another long-term engagement. So I don't think there's been ever a shortfall, or I've never complained. I'm working with a listed conglomerate right now of India, so
Okay.
I
Huh.
don't think it. I don't have a complaint in that sense.
Okay. Okay. So, moving on to the work and opportunities, like how the working and all is in the firm. What exactly is the organizational structure, the different levels in the hierarchy at Optus,
I think
and the associated responsibilities for them?
okay. So I think the progression is fairly standardized, and the terminologies are a little confused in my head because Octus has gone through a merger recently, and a Japanese
Hmm.
company has acquired us. So
Okay.
the titular names have changed, but the progression is fairly standard model around most of the consulting firms, where you start as
Hmm.
an analyst, go on to be an associate, then be a team lead, a manager, a director, and then a partner. I think the track is somewhere between 9.5 to 12 years, analyst to
Okay.
partner, all
Hmm.
going well, and the uncertainties that are involved, obviously, but it's doable.
Hmm.
doable if you stick around. That is the kind of progression. Uh, what I would, in terms of responsibility, honestly, I have constantly seen the line blur a lot. Like the workload between an analyst and associate has been similar. Now that I'm an associate, I see it merge with what a team lead or a manager would do for that matter. So I think we do,
There's a lot of overlap.
it doesn't overlap, and we do take on little bit responsibility, one role ahead of us, given how the teams and the projects have phased. And that was again similar to the point mentioned earlier, that a little quicker to responsibility, not in terms of titles, but in terms of work, it's quite
Hmm.
visible. I think it's across the board. I would feel confident to say that for across projects. It's a
Hmm.
little ahead of its time. We get into contracts, we get into contract discussions, leading projects,
Hmm.
leading client meetings. I sit for board meetings, so that happens.
Okay. Okay.
So
Interesting. That seems like fun. You sitting for board meetings after
it's
2 years at the firm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a mixed bag. You at
Hmm.
times want to and don't want to be there. So you'll know.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's how.
Sure. Yeah. So, do you have any, do you get to choose what kind of project you can work on
Yeah,
within the firm?
I think the choice in Optus and otherwise is always a function where it's a trade-off between solving for your preference and what is best suited for the company. So
Hmm.
there have been times where I can pick from two options that are more suited. Let's say something that's based in Bombay or some place where the partner has requested for someone with a certain background, right? So in that case, you do get force-staffed onto some projects. Uh, I think that I won't comment how it happens for other companies. I think it may. So they have a fair degree of preference and they do solve for it. Sometimes just the solution will come in the long-term way.
Okay.
Like it might not come around right now. Like you might have to take one project, take a bullet for a bit, see how that shapes
Hmm.
up. Again, it's going to be a new industry. It may or not be the worst, but certain times circumstances dictate where you go. But yeah, they do tend to solve. Like maybe I've been in Bombay and they're able to solve for that, which works well enough. For other
Hmm.
folks, maybe Bangalore, Delhi might get more competitive, so then you might not always get what you so like.
Okay.
But in the long term, yes, they do. Like I know I have made a certain request for my kind of projects, and over the next 6 months, it will
Hmm.
come to fruition. But
Hmm.
maybe not
So
tomorrow. Yeah,
your interest and the company's requirements need to align. That's all.
they need to. They need to not exactly align. It's about how much leeway can be given on which side. Like
Okay.
for instance, the time when I'm getting rolled off, if there are three projects on the availability spectrum, I can make a
Hmm.
choice. But at the
Hmm.
same time, if there is one in Bombay where they do not have someone, you may
Hmm.
not have that kind of a flexibility.
Okay. Okay.
So that way it's circumstantial. So yeah, it
Hmm.
works for you some days, it does not. It's a mixed bag.
Hmm. Interesting. So, how does Auctus, induce teamwork and camaraderie among its consultants? Because we see that Bain has this partying culture, BCG has like weekly dinners, team outings. So, what's it in Auctus?
I think that is something that Optus is actively working on, to be honest. We quite not haven't quite cracked that in the sense that the culture before COVID also has been client side or work from home.
Hmm.
So in that sense, when you are a client and your project is team is there, of course you will get close. You will have your weekly outings. You will socialize with them inside and outside the client office. You have your weekly, nights out and everything. But now you also need to note that most of the projects are small. Like for example, for 1 year I've been the only person here. So
Huh.
that thing is not relevant because my other teammates are in Delhi and one person was somewhere in in Patna because hometown does
Okay.
not require. So
Hmm.
they don't
Hmm.
do it. At a office level, they try and organize some stuff. Like I think in office, a lot of the folks are based out of Delhi by nature. By nature, I say
Hmm.
as either by residence or by client location. A lot of our projects are
Okay.
in Delhi, which demand us to
Hmm.
be over there. The next is
Hmm.
Bangalore. The next maybe somewhere between Hyderabad and Bombay. So now I know Delhi and Bangalore, they do have these catch-ups a lot more. And the people are a little bit bonded in that sense. Bombay, not so much. But again, it's the fact of the matter. So it is what it is. Bombay is not as many people
Hmm.
here. And maybe it's not people of the same grade and we not work together. So that socialization does not happen. But what
Right.
again? is good is we have a WhatsApp group of the team, but you do get responses there because it's not that big of a. So in that
Hmm.
sense, I have engaged with people across various things. Like when it comes to campus placements, I've worked with a lot of people on that. When it comes to certain projects, I have changed projects, I've taken guidance from folks. So through
Hmm.
that, the kind of network I have, I don't exactly feel disconnected, but yes, it's not very tangible.
Okay.
At least
Okay.
as a
Understood.
person, as a Bombay resource as of now, it is what it is, and they're trying to figure a way around it. We have our
How big is
offsites,
the
so
how
yeah,
big is the farm?
150, 200 folks.
Okay. That's kind of that's
Yeah,
like an average startup.
exactly. So, I mean, it
Hmm.
started in 2010. So, it does function like a startup in the consulting space. And their whole
Right.
objective or their statement was to be an Indian bred consulting firm that will perform at the ranks of MBB. That's what they started off
Hmm.
with. And with the merger that has happened with this Japanese company, it's gone broader to be an Asia bred consulting conglomerate that can take on the same level. Basically, someone has to start somewhere. So, in that sense, yes, it does
Hmm.
operate a lot like a startup.
Correct. 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 Nice. And any comments on your work-life balance, or do you think there is no life?
I think the answer lies on a spectrum of how much the project allows and how firm you are, how uh, firm on it you are. It's
Hmm.
somewhere between these two that you find your work-life balance. Like there are projects that are going to be high-paced. Like I've done a 3-month stint where I did not take a day off, including weekends. I've done that.
Okay.
Now being in the firm and being with a stable client, I know to take my weekends off, which still get breached on certain days. But you need to kind of you will get a sense of how to deal with these situations moving forward, on
Hmm.
where you can push back, you cannot push back. So I think it's very subjective to project to team because I know there are teams in Optus that are very aggressive. Like they are always burning on you know timelines. They're doing multiple proposals at the same time. Proposals are essentially new projects that are being sold in addition to your current project. So their
Hmm.
life can get insanely hectic, and then the typical you don't exactly have a life. It's pretty much work. But I think one thing that is true for consulting is it's cyclical by nature. You will have your weeks where it is absolutely bursting at its seams, and you're not exactly even maybe having your weekends to recoup. And then there are phases when you're just back home at 6, 7, and weekends are okay. So
That's
you
right.
find
So
your equilibrium.
on
Yeah.
an average, how many hours would you work for every week?
Hours. I know
Hmm.
the days no less than 12 hours typically.
Okay. Hmm.
So yeah, you can do the math then.
12 hours per day. I think that's like average for any consulting firm. It's too much of
Exactly.
space.
Yeah, it's 12 on the lower side and it goes up some days it's okay. Weekends have been protected with this particular client for most part. Let's see what the next one brings to me.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's really sad. So, moving on, are there any specific benefits to the employees of Auctus which like people from MBB don't have? Employee benefits, like let's say with respect to the type of people you work with or any other perks or opportunities.
I think there's nothing too specific in that sense. It's a
Okay.
function of people you have been in touch with, where you have made your network. When I say made your network, beyond projects, you can work with everyone, but how many of them you connect with, how many of them you have a rapport with, it's just a function of that. I don't think there's any place where it is above or below any other firm. Forget consulting. It's just about the
Okay.
connects you are able to establish and where that takes you moving forward. Other than that, it's quite, I think, I mean, I'm saying it's standard, but it's good. But it's
Hmm.
nothing
Hmm.
different. It's nothing different. It's just as good. You'll be fine.
Okay. Okay. And so now coming to one question which most of our viewers would be waiting for. What is the starting entry level salary for consultants at Optus?
Mm,
And how does it progress through the years?
okay. I think I'm a little outdated with the numbers because obviously there's a year-on-year re-rating that happens.
Huh.
But I think the starting they strive to be fairly competitive with MBB. So they, but obviously a little bit lower. So I think it has gone from 18 to maybe I think it's 16 or 17 when I went. Now I think I remember seeing 19 or 20. I think a more
Okay.
reliable source than me for the starting value is going to be your blue book. I think the
Hmm.
placement team publishes a blue book and you have your
Right.
portal. So those two are going to be reliable to give you the exact numbers. Don't expect much of a change from last year because it's been a standard. The economy is not that great. So it will remain
Yeah.
competitive, maybe a few notches lower. In terms of
Hmm.
promotion and progression, I think they aspire to be as competitive. So I think it's modeled closer to McKinsey, wherein
Hmm.
you get your jumps of 15-30% every year. So it's
Okay.
basically around a 15% jump every year and around
Hmm.
30% in times of promotion. Basically double. And then they have bigger jumps as you move forward. I think it's a little bottom heavy. So like I don't see that kind of progression right at the front, which
Okay.
is again similar to McKinsey, if I'm not wrong. But it is anticipated to get the jumps should be getting bigger. The reason again I'm speaking in vague terms is it's always a percentage basis and a function of when you get promoted at that point in time. So
Okay.
it's not as slab driven as there's a fixed figure like
Hmm.
you'll jump by 16. It's percentage basis and it depends on promotion cycles and yeah. But I
It's
think it
dependent on a lot of factors.
exactly like even I have not quite cracked the pattern in that sense, but I know it is fairly industry standard or consulting standard. Maybe obviously it's going to be a 5-10% lower, which is fair. They are still in the startup mode in that sense. They're going to be investing more in the firm than their
Right.
people.
Right. Right. So, moving on to the recruitment process at Auctus. So, what is the shortlisting procedure, interviews? How is it different from MBB? If you could tell us.
Sure. So I think it's the largely the framework is the same. We come
Okay.
on campus. I think we come in a little later than we would like to, but again, the company is small. We have the same set of people being buddy to every campus.
Hmm.
We have the buddy process. So
Yes.
considered by those things, we tend to start the process a little later. But
Hmm.
around October, November is when we come onto the campus, get resumes, shortlist. We have buddy processes. It's typically, I
Hmm.
think, you have 1 to 2 buddies. It's
Okay.
again a little bit that your decision wherein we have the bandwidth to do it or not. So we do
Hmm.
1 to 2 rounds of buddies, which, as typical buddy answers will be, it's more to guide the students, not
Correct.
eliminatory in any manner. It's not eliminatory in any
Hmm.
manner. So you have that, and then we come down and typically 1.1 always. So yeah, 1.1 come down. We do the hiring, which is 3 to 4 rounds of
Okay.
interviews. And yeah, so I think framework wise, same. Timeline's a little
Hmm.
bit crunched because I think MBB would already have started in some way engaging right now. And because timelines are crunched, we don't have the time to do any of the dinners and connect
Right.
meetings. We don't do that. We just
Hmm.
come down to final placements. So yeah, I think that's about it. Interviews also, if you have that doubt, it's mainly case driven plus whatever HR component that particular interviewer decides to do. Interviews are
So,
purely from
so
the consulting track, no HR interviews, no HR
okay.
dedicated interviews. Again, like
Okay.
consulting. So
Similar
yeah.
to the other firms. Right. Right. And so, does the firm hire just for analyst roles, or is there something else like BCG has their data team? So, does
No,
Optus
no.
have something like that?
So currently we haven't. I think a few years down the line they might look at it. No, I don't think. No, we don't have that distinction as of now.
Okay.
So everyone
Hmm.
comes in under one list. Then you specialize or you start getting polarized towards one kind of projects, possibly, or you don't. I mean, we don't have a track in that sense that is different from
Okay.
this. It's
Hmm.
flatly
So it's
list.
kind of standardized. Whatever you want to do, you specialize in that.
Yeah, you figure that.
Right.
You're not bound by
Hmm.
anything.
Okay. So, besides the case solving and analytical thinking skills, is there any other qualities that the firm looks for?
They I think again, those of you who would be a little bit specifically into consulting have gone through the
Hmm.
casebook, etc. Optus tends to ask this very specific type of analytical cases.
Correct.
I
Correct.
think those who get into the Optus framework, like I wouldn't want to fringe much on this session to talk about it, but those who are in the shortlist invariably get exposure to it. through casebooks or through the buddies,
Hmm.
wherein it's basically looking at decision trees and solving a case which is not a guesstimate but more quantitatively. So they basically are looking through that for clear decision making, thought clarity, structuring, and also for quick quant skills to back it up.
Right.
So that's just one kind of case. It's very specific. It's not hard to crack. Those people who get into the shortlist practice it, and it's hardly a hurdle in any way. But that's a point of differentiation I think we'll have to point out. Otherwise, it's the same old 3 to 4 kind of cases, your unconventional set.
Hmm.
Most partners will end up giving you a version of what they work on as a case,
Their project, their case, they'll give.
and you just build on that, and it's fun.
Right. Huh.
And now I,
And
I understand it because my cases, I know the projects my cases were after spending 2 years in the company. So I'm like, fair enough, interesting.
correct, correct. And coming to the resume shortlisting, so are there any particular peaks that the firm looks for, like international exposure or something of the sort? So what are the criteria you look for?
Nothing distinct from the good old consulting shortlist where they expect you to excel in more than 1 to 2 good areas on your resume
Hmm.
across
Right.
academic experiences, PORs, international, etc.
Hmm.
You have a rounded profile is what we look for. Uh,
Okay.
a notion flying around is maybe the barrier is lower, which is a fair function of how we need to hire, right? There's going to be a
Hmm.
preference towards MBB. We'll have a few more folks in our shortlist that we have enough pool to look from. So yeah, some people will talk about, you might need 1.5 peak or 2 peaks rather than the 3, 4 that other MBB have. I
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
this is not fixed, it's just a function of practicality. We need to factor
Correct.
for more
How many
folks,
people are applying? How good all of them are? So it depends on
how
that.
how good all of them are, and we need to budget for students to have a preference to MBB. It's practical. It is what
Correct.
it is. We need to
Understood.
factor for that, have more folks in the system. We don't mind training them. There has been a lot of people across the years who've had just Auctus shortlist like me and have made it
Hmm.
also because they've been come up the curve well through the buddy process.
Right. 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 So I think that sums up our questions on the recruitment process. So moving on, like about the exit options, I don't know like how much aware you are of those, but still I'll just go with
Sure,
them.
we can speak
Uh,
about it. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So in terms of like the international exposure, like MBB offers like they sponsors their employees to go to foreign universities and pursue an MBA degree or something. So does Octus also have such programs?
We do not have a chalked out policy on that front to the best of my knowledge,
Okay. Hmm.
but I also am aware a lot of this can be taken care of on a one-on-one basis given the firm size.
Okay.
Because the HR, the team you're working with. So if this is an opportunity, you can have a conversation around it. Like, will you be coming in? But also a thing to note, typically, again, it's not putting Optus down in any way. It's a practical matter. Most of these programs require you to come back to the firm and work.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Now, that is not something that typically one would expect with a company like Optus. We are
Hmm.
largely India based. We have international projects for sure. But most folks are, in fact, looking to switch up to some of the bigger brands through the MBA. So,
Correct.
invariably, I don't think this program makes sense. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't get formalized anytime soon.
Okay.
So, that's what I think it is. I know there
So
might have been one-off cases where they take care of it, but I'm not so sure how many folks will be interested to make commitment to come back to office after an MBA abroad.
so
And I
unless
think
Optus has like an expanded client base across the world, this
more
is
than
not.
client base, it's the scale they can then achieve that people will want to also come back because
Hmm.
honestly, you're looking to get a geography pivot or you're looking to roll up your brand with an MBA fundamentally. So
Correct.
very few people will go into an MBA with this kind of a commitment.
Hmm.
So in that sense, it's there. But again, I'm guessing if there is someone in that particular situation, they might be definitely open to keeping your position, having you back, and doing some kind of a middle grounding because
Right.
I know there's a lot of subjectivity that happens in the company because you work that close with the partners who are the decision makers. So
Okay.
you can
So
do something. Yeah, but it's not structured.
just sorry.
It's not structured right now. It's not
Huh.
formalized.
Right. 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 So you also mentioned that like people generally do an MBA to switch over to other firms. So similar to that, How tough or easy is it for people from Auctus to switch over to other consulting firms like MBB only? Are there any obstacles to the same?
People have done it. People have done it, I think, in a fair number. I know people in my immediate circle who have. So I'm
Okay.
definitely not impossible. What you need to be aware of is you might not match your designation.
Hmm. You might go a step down in
A
the.
step, a step down.
Oh.
Because MBB will not acknowledge 2 years in an Octus, in a Dalberg, or in an Accenture strategy as 2 years in
Hmm.
MBB.
Hmm.
There'll be some conversion rate. So maybe you will be 1 year behind, but you'll be promised an early promotion or something on
Right.
those standards. So you need to a little bit make peace with that, be okay,
Hmm.
and time it correctly when you can minimize your year back. Personally, I don't think a year there
It's going to
matters
affect a
much.
lot.
Does not matter much, but it is
Right.
there. I have to give you the facts here. So it is there. You will not go like from a 2 year tenured person to a 2 year tenured person there.
Hmm.
In most cases, it's a lot of negotiation and all of that. You can crack it. I think there
Hmm.
is a step, and there has been a
Okay.
step now.
So like maybe you'll be working under your peers then. Someone from
That's
your cohort itself. That's a
that. That's the part
possibility.
you need to make peace with. That's what I say.
Correct. Correct.
That tends to happen more often than not. As you move forward, you'll soon realize.
Hmm. Right. 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 So how is the career transition between Octus and other industries, not just MBB?
I think that is. I think that is very similar. Like,
Okay.
people do tend to go off to the startups. Some of them, and yes, when I say startups, is going to be your typical CEO roles, project management roles. There have
Hmm.
been people senior who have, you can check their profiles. They've gone on to something like Google PM also. So
Okay.
about the exits you chalk out, it's definitely counted as consulting experience, which is valued across
Hmm.
industries. You might have to put in a little bit of effort in case Octus as a brand is not as recognized in that particular person's viewpoint. And
Okay.
that's where the branding matters between an MBB and the non-MBB. And I think even some companies like Dalberg and Accenture have a name with a little bit more recognition. Octus may or may not. People who are
Correct.
affiliated with campus recruitment and with the IIT circle definitely know its
Hmm.
worth. And
Hmm.
they treat it suitably. Some places you need to prove your point maybe. But once there, it's definitely regarded as consulting experience. So startups I've seen people go into industries they have worked in with. Some even have gone into government. I think I know one or two people in that sense with government
Hmm.
consulting pieces. So it's the same.
Right.
There are, to some extent, I think the volume of opportunities that come your way might be slightly lower than in case of MBB. Like
Right.
in MBB, there are a lot that come to you directly. Those still do, but not at the same rate, is what I've
Hmm.
understood over time.
So
But
do people
you might,
also transition into VCs and investment
yeah,
banks? They do,
they
right?
have.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like the volume of those don't always come in, and you might have
Hmm.
to put, like a delta differential effort to get through. But it's not a, it's not like it's off the table in any way.
Correct. 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 So yeah, I think my questions are all done. So would you like to say a few words to our viewers as
And I think
conclusion?
covered most of it. If I do have to end this with anything, is I would say whenever you're looking through campus placements, definitely you should solve for what best you can get on campus, but
Hmm.
also try and solve for what you would want to do in the best way possible. It
Right.
may not align with what is the societal norms, or what is anyway, maybe even slotting for that matter, or what your peers might be doing. That's
Hmm.
fine. You can course correct then also. But yeah, you need not be too heartbroken if it's not a 1.1 or a 1.2. I'm not even saying consulting at that point. So, you figure what's best, and definitely you should solve for maximum, putting your effort. But it's way beyond placements, and our placements are very privileged. Our companies across our days are good irrespective. It's just a delta placement we need to do for logistics. So
Right.
let's not hold on to it too much, is all I would say. You figure what suits you, and it'll still be fine in the long term.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that we all have to keep in mind because we see a lot of people taking pressure these days, like even now in campus. So yeah, it is kind of unnecessary, right?
Mhm. I think a necessary amount of pressure is good to keep you motivated, but it shouldn't be
Yeah,
counterproductive when it shouldn't
correct,
be an end
correct.
of the world situation. So
Mhm.
that's all. It's difficult to think of it when you're in the process, but speak to your peers and seniors, I think, during the process to the best ability you have access to. They're going to provide you the most clarity in
Correct,
this phase rather than your own peers who are also in the same model. And I think that's what kept me fairly sane during my placements. Obviously, it was remote. So, but yeah, I think my peers then were purely people who have been through the process. So I had a little level headed approach towards it and possibly would have played a substantial role to how it went about.
right, right, right. So thanks a lot, Ashish. Thank you for your time, even in
Yeah.
between your hectic schedule. So thanks to all who have watched this session. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Pleasure to be back on campus. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye bye.